Can ADHD actually be a superpower? I'm Chris Cooper. This is Business is Good. And if you know a lot of entrepreneurs, you know that many entrepreneurs will say things like, oh, I've got ADD. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes they're just unfocused, distracted, maybe even mentally undisciplined. My guest today is Leighton Bingham, and we're going to talk about how he has turned his ADHD diagnosis into a superpower and just how big of a superpower that is. Leighton, welcome to Business is Good.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, man, I want to start with the ADHD diagnosis and story. I mean, you're not as old as I am, but
Right.
back when I was a kid, nobody had that diagnosis. When did you get it?
So I actually received my diagnosis about 6 years ago, when I was diagnosed with Asperger's as well. So I was in the military, going through some issues with sleep, and they
Hmm.
started noticing some things about. And I was seeing a psychologist because um, well, obviously I needed to sleep, but I was telling them about my rigidity, of like I need of my schedule. Like I wake up, I look at my schedule, and this is what has to happen every single day. So and just like kind of like Jolene, she created a plan, kind of laid out our calendar and stuff like that. So I typically have to stick to that plan. But then I was telling them like, hey, when I um, look at something or I'm in the middle of something, it's almost like I zone in so much that I don't hear anything around me.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
So you were talking to a psychologist about this. They gave you a diagnosis for ADHD and Asperger's. Do you want to just share with listeners what the difference is?
Yeah, so Asperger's is more of like you have we'll call it a superpower in one strength. So you could have it in literature, you could have it in math, you could you know um reading, writing, whatever. And then ADHD is normally categorized as um being like hyper or bouncing from thing to thing to thing, which it can be, but um, with I think what we were talking about earlier, a little bit of discipline, we can actually hone that in.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs will actually describe themselves as being ADHD, but they're not. They're just distracted or unfocused or maybe undisciplined, right? So like what is real ADHD?
Well, real ADHD, it is the inability to. I want to say it's the inability to um, keep yourself disciplined. Okay.
Hmm.
And I th- and I think that like when people aren't disciplined, especially with ADHD, they see something like something shiny, new, or even in your day to day work, like you're working on something and you get a text message, you're like, bing. And then once you get a text message and you're not disciplined enough to go back to what you're doing, you start scrolling TikTok, you start scrolling Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and then you just dive into a deep dark hole of nothing.
And so kids who get the diagnosis early, what does ADHD look like for them in the classroom?
Oh, that's a good question. So I I can only like speak to like the adulthood, but I remember what it was like going through school. Um, like reading exercises. So with ADHD, or I feel with the ADHD that I was diagnosed with, you you kind of get bored really fast. So
Hmm.
I would either skim read or read the first three lines of a paragraph and then skip to the next paragraph and skip to the next paragraph, or be like, hey, I need to, I need to do my math or, writing or whatever.
Interesting. But on the flip side, some people with an ADHD diagnosis are also capable of intense focus. And when you and I and Jolene, your wife, were talking the other day, you mentioned, or she did, that sometimes you can be so focused on something that you can't actually hear somebody talking to you. So
Right.
tell me about that.
Yeah, so I actually noticed that when, let's see, after my diagnosis, I was all over the place. And then when through some mentoring and stuff like that, they're like, "Hey, you got to get organized."
Okay.
And if you tell somebody you got to get organized, it's like, okay, I'm gonna clean this up, I'm move things around, and just kind of try to, uh, we'll say schedule things out, but it doesn't always work. So I got an app, and the app actually like schedules my day,
Hmm.
but only when things start. Okay.
Okay.
So it says you have to do lead nurture right now.
Okay.
And then I get so engrossed in it if I don't have something else going on like music or somebody to come in and stop me, that I'm just focused on that, doing that one task. And sometimes she even has to like nudge me, like, hey, hey, well, come back to life. Or, occasionally I watch TV. Same thing, like the kids will be screaming my name, or say, dad, dad, dad. And she has to say, hey, they've asked for you 3 times. Why are you not responding? I'm like, I didn't hear anything.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
no, so I think that it really helps out in the business, because in our business, I do the sales and marketing. And I am very analytical. And so I get deep into the numbers of the marketing, the back end of Facebook, um, the front end of Facebook or front end of Google, and start looking at the numbers and how can I change this? How can I fix this? What is the click through rate? What is the link click through rate? All the good things. Um, and then I'm like, okay, I need to create a new creative or ad image. I need to do some new primary text. And then I'll spend like hours doing that. Um,
Wow.
but it gets done. But that's where the hyper focus comes in. It's just like, okay, I'm doing this task till completion. But I need to set a timer, to be like, okay, you've spent 30 minutes on this task. It's time to move on to something else so you can get stuff done.
I think the Facebook ads are a perfect example because I think a lot of owners, they feel overwhelmed or bored or whatever when they're doing it, and so they just say, "Oh, forget this; it's too complicated,"
Mhm.
and they give up on it too soon, and then that's why they say, "Oh, it doesn't work for me," or "I hate Facebook ads."
Right.
So what you're describing truly is a superpower to stay engaged with that deep stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. And I like, we'll say what, 9, 10 years ago, I knew nothing about Facebook ads.
Yeah.
So here's where the intense focus comes in. I was like, I love this. I, I like the numbers. I like to see the percentages, that kind of stuff. And then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start researching this.
Hmm.
And because I become more disciplined, I can read everything on it. Like I don't skim read, I don't skip paragraphs and stuff like that. And then I apply those things, to our business.
That's interesting. And for listeners, Leighton is a mentor at Two Brain, also on paid advertising. And so this is, one reason that he's just so good at it. Another is experience. But Leighton, even when you were in the military, were you doing something with coding or something like that?
So I had a few different jobs, but my last job in the military, I was doing satellite communications, and server administration, which there was some JavaScript, some VB script, Visual Basic scripts, and stuff like that I had to do. And most of my job consists of troubleshooting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So troubleshooting, switches, routers, that kind of stuff. There's code that you could write, in like a notepad, to say, okay, you need this channel to talk to this one. Whereas you need this port for the user to do this. And you can just script all that out, apply it to the switch, and it either works or it doesn't. Um, so I remember one time I started work at usually 8 o'clock in the morning. At like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, I haven't eaten. I haven't done anything but sit in front of this terminal all day, just going like
Wow.
trying to fix it. So,
But that's what's required probably to
right.
fix it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I think a lot of our kids in general are just being diagnosed as, deficient, right? Like the ADD is, it's a deficient diagnosis, and they're kind of labeled as like less good in school because they don't conform to that old industrial model. When really, there's a growing segment of our economy that really depends on this skill.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about downsides. So I was thinking about you this weekend because my wife and I spent 7 hours in a car, and I can sit in a car for 7 hours. And if we don't speak a word, that's fine because I'm thinking about something. But obviously
Okay.
that bothers her. What's wrong with Chris?
Yeah.
And I know like you have done a 12 or a 14-hour drive before.
Mm,
So like when you're focused like that, you've said sometimes your wife has to poke you like, hey, why aren't you listening?
mm,
What are some of the challenges about that come with kind of this capability of defocus?
mm, mm. That's a great question. Challenges. I um obviously not hearing people. Like that's one of the biggest challenges. Um if if I don't time block, or set a timer, like nothing else gets done. Um
Mm.
one of the other things is if I do not schedule stuff, like, um, nothing could get done.
That's interesting. Why is that?
Um, I I think it all comes down to discipline,
Mm.
like 100%. Like if I don't see it on my schedule, then I'm kind of content, um, saying, okay, I don't have anything on my schedule. I must not need to do anything. And then I can
Oh,
get so engrossed in like not doing anything or playing video games or watching TV or whatever. So that I see that as a downside.
mhm.
Uh, so some people, if they like TV, it may not be, but you know what I mean. So yeah.
When you're running a business,
Mhm.
obviously, this can be a skill on the back end, but a lot of our business is dealing with people too. Would that be possible without Jolene, who is great with people? Or how can entrepreneurs deal with people if they do have ADHD and they'd rather be focused on their Facebook ads?
So dealing with people, having Asperger's, it's tough for me to deal with people,
Mm.
just because I don't relate well to them. But um, how um, I'm trying to think. Yeah. Go ahead.
Could you learn enough to deal with people successfully, or do you think it's better to have a partner who's good at that?
I think a little bit of both,
Mm.
honestly. Because obviously Jolene, she's crushing it. I do, I've done some personal training, and you
Mm.
still have to be able to relate to people, but I've learned enough that I can tell by body language. And then I just know that I have to put my phone somewhere else, um, and put it on do not disturb. I do the same thing when I go to see a psychologist. I see one every week because I think therapy is important for everybody.
Yeah,
Uh, I put it on do not disturb. That way I can have the meaningful conversations I need to have.
very
And
interesting.
yeah, just like in business, and I think there's so many nuances to, we'll say, having to do, things on a schedule, or, they don't get done. You do have to, one of the big things is relating to people, but if you can't get your metrics, I'm sorry, um, and you can't input them somewhere so you can track them, then you're just kind of spinning your wheels.
All right. So let's say that you're dealing with, or you're talking to a parent
Mhm.
and they're like, my kid wants to open a business, but they've never really, done well in school. They're scattered, they're distracted. Their teacher said maybe they have ADHD. Like, what advice do you give that parent or that kid?
One, start by hiring a mentor. That was the biggest that was the biggest change for me.
Mm,
Uh, but like start small, because it can be overwhelming. But start small by setting aside um, time, those blocks of time, and by being disciplined, being able to do it every single day, or once a week, or twice a week, whatever. Uh, it'll grow that skill over time.
Just on a final note here, let's talk about fitness. I mean, you and I are both in the fitness industry, and so sometimes we just take it for granted or forget how
Right.
important fitness is to maintaining focus. How much do you have to exercise to maintain focus? What happens if you don't exercise? Tell us that stuff, Leighton.
Oh, how much exercise? I used to. So a little background on me. In 2018, I placed 31st overall in the world, 35 to
Amazing
30 category in CrossFit. Yeah,
for
yeah,
CrossFit. Yeah.
uh,
Wow.
yeah. So back then, I had to work out every single day, twice a day. And when I was in the middle of a workout, that's where the intense focus actually paid off. Um, because I could tune every single thing out, just kind of go through the motions, or, not go through the motions, but
Do it. Yeah.
yeah, just do it. But now, and then if I skip workouts, then I was angry, because, and then it would be I'd be all over the place. But now I can get, 3 workouts in a week. I can still maintain that focus. And I feel good about myself, as far as like, hey, this is, you know, I can do business and I can do fitness.
Awesome, man.
Yep.
Hey, thanks a lot, Leighton. I think this is going to be enormously helpful and kind of show ADHD in a different light as a potential gift to a lot of entrepreneurs or just parents of kids who are struggling to figure out what to do.
Right. Yeah, yeah, for sure.